Tony D and Little Joan with a screenwriter's take on Brotherhood of the Wolf from 2001. Yeah, I know. I am late to this game, but I'm going to review it anyway. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books. The links are in the description. Comedy horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys. Books 1 through 16. Available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. All right, so as always, I'm going to give you my non-spoiler review, and then we'll get into the spoilers. All right, so here's my non-spoiler review. I think the movie's a little too long in the beginning. I think the first act really needed to be cut down. But that being said, overall, I kind of like the movie. I definitely love the action. The action's spectacular. It's still, even with all the action, it still feels like it's dragging on and on. You're like, oh my God, this movie doesn't end. I mean, it's 2.5 hours long. But, I love the aesthetic. The aesthetic's interesting, and the fighting in that aesthetic makes it exciting to watch. The mystery itself and the main character, I think it gets a little lost on its own story in the beginning and doesn't really get on track till really late in the second act, early in the third act, which are long. But once it does, it becomes a much more compelling movie. I think it would have been better under 2 hours, this movie. Feels like it almost needed like another draft of the script and really cut it down. Feels like it's based on a book and that maybe they had to have these scenes to make it true to the book, but it almost pays off in the wind up at the end. But with some of the characters, I watched a dubbed version. I know you all hate me, but there's too much going on. I wouldn't have been able to follow this movie had I had to read the subtitles. That would have just been a non-starter in this movie. Too much is going on. There's a lot of characters too, which is a bit of a drawback in that situation as well. But the world it creates is pretty expansive. I really enjoyed that. I love that it is based on a real event, I found out. And it draws from its history. So much is going on. I have to be honest, I kind of missed some of it. But I read some about it afterwards. This is actually my second take of this, and reading it now, it's like, oh yeah, that makes a hell of a lot more sense. I kind of missed that. It kind of just flew by me watching it, which again, why I think they really should have cut about 20 minutes out of that first act and throughout the movie. But overall, I think if you like action movies, more like martial arty type movies. This is a very different martial art kind of movie. It's got a different feel. It's got like a French feel to it, and I don't say that in a negative way. The tricorner hat aesthetic and the 17th century aesthetic is pretty awesome, or I should say 18th century aesthetic is pretty awesome. It's interesting. You don't see a lot of movies like this in that era. I can understand why Sticks and Hammer calls this his favorite movie. It's very odd. It's very strange. It's very different. And the other main thing I really liked about it is the characters, and I always say this is very important writing a screenplay. The characters play at the height of their intelligence. Nobody in this movie does anything stupid. You could call some of the plot points kind of weird or dumb or like it, but you can't call the characters stupid. They're all doing what they can to look and be as smart as possible. Even if they, fail, they're trying, and you don't get the sense that they just did something just to make the plot work. So that I very much appreciated. So overall, I would mostly recommend this movie, but again, I would warn you, it's 2.5 hours, and it does feel long in the first half of the movie. So if you're willing to slog through it, I think the payoff's pretty good. Um, all right, let's get into the spoilers. If you haven't seen this movie that's 24 years old, uh, it's spoilers ahoy now. I'm going to give the whole thing away. Okay, so first act, you have our main character here. He's a naturalist. He's been sent by the king to figure out what the hell is happening in this province. There's a savage beast attacking people and killing them. And everyone's complaining. The Marquis basically asked for help, and so they sent him to find out what's going on. So he comes and he brings his Indian companion who he met during the French-Indian War, and they became buddies, and his tribe got wiped out. We hear his deal about halfway through the movie, and he's like expert fighter dude, and the naturalist is no slouch. But they are brothers in arms. They consider them They consider each other brothers, and they really go into detail about these two, which I did appreciate as well. It's just it was a little slow at the beginning, and part of the problem is the movie almost gets distracted by having our lead guy here instantly fall in love with this woman, and like half the movie's about that, which is fine until they get back into the wolf story, and then kind of have to wrap up the romance, and then almost give it next to no time at the end. So it was very odd the way they rolled out the romance. I struggled with it a little bit because it almost felt like they rushed it, and they kind of focused on the wrong things for parts of the movie, even though those parts of the movie were interesting. It felt like they got distracted with their own world for a bit. But that being said, the first act is he arrives at the Marquis's castle. The Marquis is telling the story in flashback. He's about to be strung up or have his head removed during the French Revolution, and this happened years prior. And he's writing a memoir. So the naturalist and his buddy come to town. They get into a fight with some soldiers, and then they're hunting the wolf creature or whatever it is. Along the way, they see victims and they start accumulating evidence, but it is painstakingly slow. He's more interested in his hot new girlfriend, who nobody can seem to woo, but he, of course, does. And then he goes to a brothel where he has a good time with the brothel lady. Eventually, time passes long enough that the king sends another soldier, fires one soldier, and then says, no, this soldier, he's going to solve the problem. And the way he decides to solve the problem in the second act is he forces the naturalist to taxidermy a regular wolf and make it so large and ferocious that they can blame it on all the killings, and then announce that the beast is dead, and then pretend like anybody else who dies, well, that doesn't matter. And at first it's just like, okay, and then there's a long scene where he's actually doing it, and it's just like, well, we really didn't need to see this scene, but okay. And then he takes that back to the Marquis, and they, I think, or France, and they make an announcement, or Paris, and then they make an announcement, oh yeah, the beast is dead or whatever. And you get this pitch about a book that they've banned, and at first you're just like, what the hell is this book? And then that turns out to be key to the whole thing. So it's this weird cult, Brotherhood of the Wolf, that has developed this plan where they have the wolf beast, which is some giant wolf they got in Africa, and and the one guy raised it to be ferocious and to wear metal. and his arm is all messed up, but he keeps it in a weird brace behind his back for some reason, which I didn't even notice. But I guess I just assumed he had his arm cut off, or I just really wasn't paying attention. There's so much going on in this movie. But anyhow, it turns out he does have a hand, and it's all weird and scarred, and he's the evil guy who's directing the wolf to kill people. We didn't quite see enough of that, but we see a little bit of it. And then it turns out to be the brother of the girl who he's in love with. And we know that there's going to be a big confrontation. The Indian companion is killed, probably at the height of the second act. Again, really long acts, and now we're into some serious action. Like, they do a big scene where they try to capture the beast, and they almost do, but then the Brotherhood of the Wolf basically are the guys who kill him and then throw him to the wolf. Or no, they don't even throw him to the wolf. They just throw him off a hill and he just dies. And then our hero is losing his girl. He has to get revenge for his friend. And then there's this weird bit where he goes and he gets revenge for his friend, uncovers part of the cult, the Brotherhood of the Wolf, because he's fighting them in this house, and you see these weird rooms, and then there's the books, like more of this banned book. You realize it ties into that somehow. And then, he does all this fighting, and then he has to stop halfway through his revenge to burn his friend's body and collect the ashes. When he does that, he's arrested, thrown into the gulag, and then the lady from the brothel has to save him by drugging him so he can pretend he's dead, bury him, dig him up later, and then he shows up again and starts taking revenge. And I was just like, whoa, that's a lot. That's a lot. Personally, I don't think you needed all that. The whole dying and digging him up thing. Yeah, but it's been done before. I don't think it, even before 2001, it's been done before. But, it wasn't the worst bit I ever saw. But by that time, the movie was long in the tooth, and I kind of wanted, like, some answers. But then you finally get them, and it's this whole Brotherhood of the Wolf, and they're basically, I guess their idea is to sort of topple the government or hold the government hostage to their whims. And they're going to try it in every province. So they're going to essentially use the beast to pressure everybody and take over the province. But it's also a matter of taking over the country to some extent. But they're exposed by our hero, who's been raised from the dead. And then they're all killed. And then they kill the beast. And there's this cool fight scene with the brother, who turns out to be the head baddie, and he's got this awesome sword. Very cool scene. Comes out of nowhere. And so the fight scenes are off the charts, but most of them happen at the end. And then he has to get to the girl, who, I guess she drank some of the poison. Like, there's a scene where she's like sipping, and her brother comes in and said, "Don't drink that, it's poison." I guess she drank some of it, was the implication. Or her brother then later poisoned her because he wanted his sister all to himself, and she's like horrified at this. And then he goes cuckoo bananas, and so she's dying. And then the Indian dude had this magic stuff in his bracelet that cured people of various ailments, so he uses that to save her. But then there's this, they cut back to the Marquis, about to be killed during the French Revolution, and he sort of just narrates the ending, which is like, oh yeah, they both escaped to Africa and lived happily ever after. I couldn't leave because I had to stay here with my lands and whatnot, and that's why he's being executed, and he sort of wondered what happened to him, and I guess they lived happily ever after. But it was kind of a weird ending. It was like, okay, you're not going to give us a scene with the couple saying, "Oh, you were great. No, you were great. I'm glad we're in love," or something. But it's the French, man. They like to do things differently, and I kind of appreciate that. It was weird. It was odd. You know, um, overall, I looking at it, I I can say I liked it. I didn't like it as much as Sticks and Hammer. I definitely can't make this my favorite movie. It's interesting. It's different. The fight scenes are cool. Um, but yeah, I would have cut 20 minutes out of this easy, easy, and sped. And it's not so much the pacing, although the pacing is a little slow in places. It's just too much is happening. You don't really need that many characters to get across what you're doing. It's nice that you do, but like we see some of these characters like 5 times before they're finally killed or whatever. And it's like, we see them fight multiple times and then finally they fight and it's just like, okay, finally they're being killed. But like it seems like they're almost way too good at fighting to be killed at the end. Like at the end, it's just like, oh, it's time to kill them, so they all die. But you know, and the motivation is given to our protagonist here when his friend dies, which is why he kills everybody. But I almost didn't feel it, even though they dove into these characters, like they didn't take shots of him. He lights his body on fire and it's burning in a pyre. Like we didn't get a shot of him like standing there like remembering his friend, you know? Like I would have liked to have seen that, like him looking sad and looking away and remembering and then looking up and like that kind of thing. They just keep going on. And granted, it's a lot of movie, and I know I'm asking for more time in the movie, but I think it really needed that sort of breath in that moment to show how important his friend was to him, because he said it was his brother, or have him crying, something. Like it felt like it just rushed past that, and it felt like they spent so much time luxuriating in the beginning of the movie, and then it got to the end and it was like, oh my god, we're way over 2 hours, we got to wrap this up. And then it kind of like pushed it off the hill to hurry it up. So yeah, I mean, but the detail's amazing. It is based on a real historical event, and that's kind of really cool. And quite frankly, I wanted to see more. I honestly, I would have loved to. I think if this movie was made today, they would have had the Indian guy live, and we would have seen a second movie with these guys solving another mystery. Um, you know, which would have been fun. Would have been fun to see their adventures a little bit, and solving mysteries of like the one of the wolf, I guess. Um, but yeah, so overall, I would say from a screenwriting perspective, there are things in this movie that could have been taken care of by other characters. Some characters could have been combined. The bookend of the marquee does work, but part of the problem was there were so many characters in the movie, I looked away from the screen. I wasn't sure who the Marquis was in the beginning. I kind of forgot about him. There's so many guys in white wigs. I confused him with other guys in white wigs, and I was like, oh, that must have been one of the guys who was writing a memoir before. What happened to all the burning and whatnot? Or I looked away from the screen when they said, oh, French Revolution or something. Maybe I got distracted and looked away, but that kind of stacking character on top of character on top of character did hurt the movie to some extent for me. But that being said, it's not a bad movie. It's just, it's a bit of a slog in the beginning. Once it gets going, it's better. It's better. And the mystery kind of doesn't come together for our naturalist. He's sort of trying to figure it out. he doesn't really figure it out until, I mean, their traps are cool as hell. I'll say that the trap scene is really cool with the wolf. It doesn't work. None of them work, but pretty cool. Um, so, yeah, if you like this aesthetic, if you like, kind of martial arts stuff, it's a very different martial arts movie, very French sensibilities. I think you'll like it. Yeah, I think you'll like it. I can see why Sticks and Hammer likes it because he likes weird stuff, and it's very odd, and it almost has like a goth vibe to it, but it's different. It's very different. And the sword fight at the end is pretty badass. I gotta say, it comes out of nowhere, and you're like, oh, whoa! So a lot of cool surprises. I just wish you had stacked them under 2 hours. Anyhow, that's it for me, Tony D and Little Joan. Tune in later tonight for the live stream where we do it live at 7 p.m. where we'll be talking about the box office and whatever else happened in Hollywood this week. Hope to see you there. We'll see you in the next one.